Good day, everyone. I am Paul Donato, Chief Research Officer here at the ARF, and welcome to today's Insight Studio, The Measurement Dilemma, Navigating Privacy-Driven Disruption. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, OptiMine. We're recording the session today, and that link will be delivered to you on Monday, March 28th. It will include both presentations and the panel discussion. The presentations today are IAB's State of Data 2022 and OptiMine's Guide, How to Future-Proof Your Marketing Measurement. Please place any questions that you might have in the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring it through the course of the presentations, and we'll try to make sure we address it at the end. I'm going to introduce both speakers first and then turn it over to Angelina. So Angelina Eng is Vice President, Measurement and Attribution, Programmatic and Data Center for the IAB. In her role, Angelina develops, identifies, and instantiates standards and practices for the marketing and media ecosystem on behalf of brands, agencies, publishers, retailers, ad tech platforms, and data partners. This includes collaborating with product and operation teams to bring business and technical standards and solutions to the market. And Angelina is also an advocate on behalf of the IAB membership. First, Matt Voda, CEO of OptiMine, will introduce the day and the agenda for the day before Angelina speaks. Matt is CEO of OptiMine. He brings a deep experience and a proven track record of cloud-based technology and analytics success to his role at OptiMine. Matt joined OptiMine from United Health Group, where he led consumer marketing within the $40 billion Optum division, developing and deploying sophisticated analytics-driven approaches to yield significant gains in engagement and ROI. So first, welcome, Matt.
Okay, just a quick word about OptiMine. We are a 100% privacy-safe marketing measurement and optimization solution that helps brands measure the incremental contributions of their digital and traditional marketing across online and offline conversion points. And today's topic is an especially important one, one that we hear from many brands in the market as they're looking to adjust and adapt to the privacy-related data loss that they're facing. And the main question that we hear consistently is how to future-proof measurement efforts to ensure success moving forward, given what's happening in the market. I wanted to give a special thanks to the IAB and ARF for the opportunity to discuss this topic impacting all of us today. And with that, we'll outline the agenda. As you're all aware by now, Apple made privacy-related changes on its devices last year, and now several states have rolled out their own privacy-related regulations. And now Google is next up with a wide set of privacy changes, all creating a major dilemma for participants in the industry. The IAB today will be summarizing this dilemma, sharing research that they have recently completed to talk about the state of the industry and the state of industry readiness and efforts that either are or aren't being taken by the market. From there, I'll drill into a deeper dive on Google topics and the changes that are slated to come into the market with Google later this year, and then we'll move into a panel discussion. As always, feel free to submit your questions as we go through today, and we'll make sure to cover those in our discussion later. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angelina. Angelina, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. So my topic is called the State of Data 2022. It is our 5th annual report. Each year we cover a different topic around data and the advertising industry. This year we focused on what we call the measurement dilemma and assessing the industry's awareness and readiness for changes in measurement and addressability, especially given what we've seen with Apple iOS as well as Privacy Sandbox. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. There is a link that you'll get to the full report. So just setting the stage, a new era of disruption is upon us. There are changes in privacy regulation, deprecation of third-party cookies and identifiers, and evolving platform rules and mandates. These are profoundly affecting the way that we collect our data, measure, optimize, and it truly is going to disrupt the entire industry. There were 3 takeaways from the study. Measurement, as we know, it is over, and there's big money here at stake. About nearly 60% of the industry leaders that we surveyed and interviewed expected that campaign measurement was going to be affected by the loss of third-party cookies and identifiers, but not enough action is actually being taken to mitigate these effects. Since third-party cookies and identifiers power addressability and measurement within the programmatic ecosystem, we anticipate that this will affect about $10 billion of sell-side ad revenue. And then if you've read the news, Facebook also mentioned that they would they would see about a $10 billion impact. So just alone between programmatic and Facebook, we're anticipating about $20 billion and more being affected. There is a sense, number 2 is there is a sense of false confidence. About 3/4 of the people that we surveyed claimed that they were prepared for the loss of third-party cookies. But then when we drilled deeper into the data, we noticed that there are that many of them were not taking the necessary steps to adapt to these changes in data, as well as from an operational standpoint. The third thing is it was very clear that we need to take action as an industry now. So the IAB is calling on everyone within the industry to engage, collaborate, and help to come up with solutions to solve, especially for cross-channel measurement, and establish a dynamic framework enabling the ability to adapt in this ever-evolving technical changes, as well as within regulation. So just a quick snapshot. So as you can see, year over year here, when we surveyed brands, agencies, publishers, and ad tech, each of them, we noticed an increase in confidence year over year. So it was about a 15 point increase across the board, with ad tech being the most prepared. And that kind of makes sense to us, especially since the ad tech community has been leaning very heavily into solutions like Privacy Sandbox, as well as having to adapt to the changes with Apple OS. But there is still a lot of work to be done, especially with brands and marketers. So when we talk about education and awareness, and we had asked the question, how knowledgeable would you gauge yourself as far as understanding Google's Privacy Sandbox? We saw a wide array of responses here. Again, ad tech seemed to be the most knowledgeable, but as you can see, that with brands and publishers, as well as data companies that are actually bringing this data set together, the awareness was, the knowledge level was very low. Approximately a third of those responses claim that they know more about Google and the changes like topics and Fledge and so forth. So this is quite alarming, because this is also indicative of perhaps even some of the other solutions that we have in the marketplace around identity solutions, Unified ID 2.0, things that the Tech Lab is developing in terms of open measurement SDK, or around seller-defined audiences. So if you go on to the next slide, some of the things that we're seeing was that there was very little progress year over year when it came to these 3 things. First was around first-party data. That remained relatively flat. So even though there were companies felt that they were more prepared, there wasn't a significant growth in terms of strategies around spending towards first-party data. In addition, many of them were not changing their measurement approach, which I thought was surprising, and actually went down, given the fact that many companies had to scramble to accommodate all the changes with Apple OS. And the use of AI did not increase at all. I think many of the companies were continuing to leverage the same existing partners, but they weren't looking for new solutions to help them with modeling and audience insights and measurement. And less than half of publishers are collecting enough first-party data for audience matching. The last year and a half, we've heard a lot around identity solutions, but this to me was very surprising that publishers felt that they still did not have enough resources to support first-party data. There was one publisher that said, I quote, "The benefit of their first-party data is when you have that foundation, then you can use that data for our advertising partners, both from an insights perspective through to an activation perspective." So I think our data support, I think of our data supporting our business. We need more publishers to think about this as they move forward, given some of the regulation changes, as well as the lack of the inability to actually target individuals from between publishers and advertisers. And then one other question we asked them was, how do you think your revenue would be affected? Most of them, if you look, there wasn't a lot of change, and the numbers are quite surprising. Approximately 70% of audiences said that they did not expect their revenue to change, as well as they did not think that their financial equity, resources, or cash flow would be affected. Now, I find that surprising, because if you think about all the many of the news that we've heard in terms of the stock market, cost per acquisitions going up, CPMs going up for Apple OS devices, this definitely will have an impact on the marketplace. And then, so even though they thought that their revenue and their financial investments weren't going to be affected, they did believe that as far as their investment affecting their revenue margin, the following would be such as ad campaign measurement, attribution modeling would be most affected. And then we looked at things like talent acquisition as well. But overall, I think that if you think about how measurement is kind of the foundation for all digital advertising, and the ability to connect data from the front end to the back end, this is the most crucial part of where we're most concerned about as we move forward. So real quick, in terms of three action items that we think that every company out there should be thinking about if they're not already, is one, embrace these continuous changes, monitor the ever-evolving changes, and assess the impact to your finances, your infrastructure, your operations, and talent. You should be evaluating your data stack and implementing new tech standards and solutions to enable cross-channel measurement. So again, things like seller-defined audiences, ads.txt, open measurement SDK. And then thirdly, collaborate with the industry bodies to establish common language and universal standards for cross-channel measurement, including transactional KPIs. Those are the things that we're having conversations and actually working on within the IAB. So if you're interested in hearing more about how we're addressing this, you can shoot me an email at angelina@iab.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Angelina. And I think we can go to the next slide. I'm going to pop in here. And we're going to, I believe, conduct a poll. Yes, we are. And the purpose of this poll is to see how much you agree with the respondents from the IAB survey. So how prepared is your company regarding changes to cookies, IDs, tracking, and privacy regulations? There's the poll. And I'm now going to welcome Matt back, who will be privy to the answers of the poll and perhaps can let us know what that poll looks like.
All right, answers are coming in. Got a number of responses already. Just take a minute to give everyone a chance to weigh in.
This is great, live television.
Yes, very exciting. Okay. So right now, the consensus is somewhat prepared. We've started. About 60% of the respondents have indicated that they've started progress. About 20% say they're fully prepared. So hats off to those folks. 20% said they're a little prepared. Planning has begun. Surprisingly, zero. Maybe people don't want to admit this. No one said they're not prepared. So we'll take that with a grain of salt.
And of course, the kinds of people who would watch this Inside Studio are concerned about the issue and therefore probably skew towards the more heavily prepared.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yes, we have a more advanced audience, a little self-selection going on.
And with that, over to you, Matt.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Angelina. All right, so now I'm going to dive more deeply into Google Topics. And it's an upcoming privacy-related change that's going to impact everyone in the industry. With that said, Google's been very active on the privacy front, and we thought it was critical to take some time to explain what Topics is under the umbrella of a broader initiative called Privacy Sandbox, and how Topics has evolved and where the new privacy approach is heading. So following Apple's own significant privacy changes last year, Google's pursuing privacy changes that will make Apple's seem pretty trivial in comparison, we believe. I think everyone's now aware that Google will be ending support for the third-party cookie in Chrome, but maybe what is less known is that the move will end all individually targeted ads, as well as ad tracking in the Google ecosystem. And going deeper, there are many other facets of this privacy sandbox change that are less known, and certainly that's reflected in the IAB's research as well. So I'll take a few minutes here to review the changes and some of the implications for marketers, and in particular for marketing measurement. Okay, so let's start with the broader picture first, Google's Privacy Sandbox. And the Privacy Sandbox is an initiative from Google that's open source, open to the public, open to the industry for feedback and input on future direction. And the Privacy Sandbox covers all of Google's planned privacy changes, including, of course, changes to Chrome, but also to the Android operating system and other areas as well. And of course, it deals mainly with things like cookie deprecation. But as I mentioned, it'll also prevent all individual consumer tracking as well. And so the Privacy Sandbox covers a lot more ground, including things like how to stop spam and ad fraud, how to prevent cross-site tracking and ensure privacy, even how retargeting may work in this new privacy scheme. And as I mentioned, it's open to the public, and I highly recommend that you all go to the Privacy Sandbox and check it out. And while some of it gets more technical, covering things like proposed API designs, there's a lot in there that is less technical. It's a way for you and your own teams to get more advanced knowledge on the changes and get moving on your own plans for how you'll need to adjust your own efforts. And it's at privacysandbox.com, and you'll see all the documentation that Google has been keeping. And I will say that they have also been adjusting the efforts based on public feedback. So I know they invite the industry to participate more vocally and help shape the future direction of this initiative. So it all started with FLoC, Google Federated Learning of Cohorts, and you may have heard of Google FLoC mainly last year. And this is one of the main initiatives within the Privacy Sandbox that was designed to deal with the death of the cookie. And I'll cover this in a little more detail because some of you may think that FLoC is still active. It isn't. But more importantly, it'll help explain the initial direction that Google took and is still taking, and how Topics has shifted from the original FLoC proposal. Google FLoC, Federated Learning of Cohorts, is a lot like contextual targeting. Everything old becomes new again. And a FLoC cohort is put together as a consumer goes to different websites, and in their browser history provides contextual profiles or clues as to their interests and intent. So being in Minneapolis, if I check out Minnesota Twins off-season moves, it probably means that I like the Minnesota Twins. And if you're my daughter and you love Billie Eilish and engage with Billie Site and her content, you're probably in a different cohort altogether. Probably not a lot of overlap between our two profiles. But the basic approach is that these interests from cohorts of people will, with like interests, and that these interests are available then in Chrome for use in ad targeting. Now, the case in point, the industry weighed in on the FLoC design and showed that it could actually be used to uniquely identify a consumer using more advanced fingerprinting techniques by piecing together different elements and attributes of the user, the browser, the session, when added up would identify that user. And to Google's credit, they acknowledged this privacy risk and came up with a revised design called Google Topics. Topics still works similarly to the original flock design, the originally proposed approach, but there are some important differences outlined here, and really driven by industry feedback. To address the privacy risks raised by the industry, Google has put in place more anti-fingerprinting controls to prevent bad actors in the MarTech industry from coming up with ways to work around those privacy restrictions and come up with a unique identifier for a consumer. Along with that change, Google updated the approach to prevent the capture of information about the user that wasn't known from their browser or their browsing patterns. And Google also simplified the contextual interest groups of the cohorts. Originally, the cohorts were numeric IDs. It wasn't clear how many there were going to be or how deeply precise they would be. And so Google has simplified those interest groups and reduced the number, made them human readable. And with that, Google also promised to block more sensitive contextual interest groups that might be based on sexual orientation or religious affiliation, as an example. So these add up to a collection of changes that were made from the original flock proposal and now shape topics moving forward from a privacy standpoint. So walking through that same flow, changing up flock a bit, each participating site now will be mapped to a shorter list of topics. And as the consumer visits sites, Chrome will create a list of top topics for that user. These top topics will get deleted each week and then refreshed with the next set of browsing activity. And then from there, the topics will be made available for ad targeting, along with, as I said, added controls to prevent cross-site and cross-device tracking. Google has a separate initiative within the Privacy Sandbox to provide view-through measurement, which would be more summarized, and very importantly, would not use individual consumer level tracking or identity. And also worth noting, it would be measurement, at least now, this may change, that's fairly unique to Google and Google properties. What this represents is a very important change with very significant implications for marketing attribution. So if your current approach to marketing measurement uses individual level tracking, and pretty much every multi-touch attribution solution does this, Google's changes will be a problem, a very significant problem, because you won't be able to have the ability to conduct user level tracking in Chrome, which is a very large portion of the market and sessions. Topics stops all cross-site tracking and cross-device tracking. So if you're piecing together a path across devices or sites, at least within the Google ecosystem, you won't be able to do that any longer. And cross-network attribution will cease too, or will become much more difficult to do. And a common use case here would be something like measuring the path of purchase across Facebook and Google. And for a large portion of sessions, that will disappear. So I'll say this again, if you're relying on an attribution approach that uses individual level tracking across sites, ads, and devices, Google's change will create a very large hole in that picture. And Google isn't done, this isn't just topics. So a few weeks ago, they announced an Android version of the Privacy Sandbox. And this follows Apple's own app tracking transparency that was rolled out in 2021 with iOS 14.5. It will adopt the same privacy principles that we see in topics, but more specific to the Android OS, which includes stopping individual tracking and targeting. And it would have the same disruptive effect for mobile ad measurement and attribution as well, which today relies on identity matching across devices. Android right now is about 46% of US mobile activity. So this is a major disruption in the wings. So when we net out the changes happening across the market, this wave of consumer privacy is disrupting the market. And whether that's the uptick in privacy-related regulatory changes, which we haven't really talked about. There's 15 or more US states with their own privacy regulations in their own regulatory pipelines. Certainly what we've talked about today with major technology players who are reducing or stopping individual tracking and targeted advertising. These are major new risks for brands particularly as we think about tracking-based measurement and attribution. This is some of the most significant disruption we've seen in the digital space in decades. So because of this, brands need to think and plan now for how to future-proof their own measurement approaches, because this is going to be happening soon. So if we look at the timing, and this is in the Privacy Sandbox, field testing is happening right now. Starting in Q4 of this year, in 2022, Google will be transitioning to topics and will start the rollout of cookie deprecation. And this will continue into next year, where it will conclude in Q3. So we're not talking about the distant future here, particularly if you think about the time it takes to move to new approaches. So time is really running out to take steps now to update your measurement approaches and be ready for this as it rolls out later this year. So I'm guessing we prompted some questions, and we'll take time now to move into a panel discussion.
Super, thanks, Matt. And we do have one question from the floor, which I think is an interesting one. And that is, can we talk a little bit about how the trade desk fits into this whole program?
Angelina, you probably have a better perspective than we do on that.
So I won't claim to be an expert on the trade desk, but I'll talk about Unified ID 2.0 a little bit. What we're seeing, so Unified ID 2.0 is going to allow the buy side and the sell side to be able to communicate first-party data in an interoperable standard way. Currently, as if you think about a lot of CRM onboarding that they have to onboard into DSPs, that process is not consistent from platform to platform. So as publishers and advertisers try to work with those CRM onboarding systems, they want to do it in a standard way. And so Unified ID 2.0 is going to allow for that. Now, the stuff that they're doing is to create an interoperable standard. So there are discussions of making sure that how that works within the programmatic ecosystem. I can't get into too much more other details since I'm not really part of, that's really something that's being discussed in the IAB Tech Lab groups that and so I can't get into the technical stuff, but I think things like OpenPath that they're working on, where they are trying to have direct relationships with publishers, is one of those ways to minimize the intermediaries in between, so that as they're thinking about first-party data and being able to tap into things like seller-defined audiences, which are creative segments based off of publishers' first-party cookies, then that can be done. That exchange of information is a lot quicker and in a more standardized way. So I think it's an interesting move on their part.
I can't speak also to the technology or the technique of the trade desk, but at a minimum, we know that they've announced that they have their own identification technique, and it has been adopted by some pretty big tech companies. So it's a very relevant question. So before we dive into all of our panels, there's a ton of questions that come from the floor. This rarely happens, but it goes to, I think, the importance of the issue. So let's in deference to our audience, make sure we get through all those questions. Second one, a little bit long, but let me get through it. Since there will be no cookies, what identifier will topics share weekly browsing patterns with? Is the user ID shared each week? Will that be the same with topics changing? Looks like people are shaking their head no. Will it be possible to create a longitudinal profile of a user ID behavior over time? I don't know.
I like how we agree.
But it sure sounds like no, and no.
The short answer is no. Yeah, I mean, this is the change. Google will no longer be providing any user level information. What will be shared is, Chrome will serve up the ability to serve an ad to a topic, an interest area, but there will be nothing about the user as part of that. And there will not be a way to create a longitudinal profile of user behavior over time. So this is a fundamental change, and there will no longer be user level information as part of this.
Yeah, so I'll get a little bit into the technical way that it works. So a browser, each week, there are several topics that will be associated to your browser based on the domains that you visit, right? So the browser is going to select, and there'll be like 5 topics per week that they're looking at that kind of bubble up. And for the past historical 3 weeks, one of those topics will be allowed to be transmitted to what they call an API caller. That API caller, you have to have visited two sites that that API caller has been associated with. So think about from the publisher side, as well as one of the domains that you visit. So let's just call, an SSP as an API caller. So that SSP will have had to have served you an ad or seen you on, seen that browser must have been seen by that API caller in order for that topic to be associated with you. So they will only get one topic for you for that particular website, so that only that piece of information is provided. A publisher can leverage their own first-party data, be it a contextual signal included into the bid stream, so that it can call to the ad server and provide a more relevant experience, but it's only a topic. So there's no other information other than a topic transmitted over to the API caller, which then the publisher's ad servers will have to do a little bit more work to possibly make it a little bit more relevant to you.
This will sound like this is my question, a naive question, but is there anything in what you just described, does it imply a first-party relationship?
No.
No, not at all.
No.
Okay.
The browser, so instead of the browser providing, or it will just look at each website will be, can associate more than one topic to themselves, I think. And that's still debatable right now, but only it will just bubble up all the topics off of your browser history for the past 3 weeks into that would be available to the API callers.
Cool. Okay, so we have a lot of technical questions coming up. It looks like we have the right folks here. Next one is the ability to add pixels to campaigns in order to measure, is that going to change, the ability to add pixels?
So there is a thing called conversion API and aggregated reporting. These are things that they're talking about as well under Fledge. There will be the opportunity to select pixels. Now you probably will be limited to the number of event pixels within your website, as well as the ability to prioritize those pixels so that you can, you can figure out like priority 1 would be the actual sales page. Priority 2 would be add to cart product. Priority 3 would be reviewing a product page. So you can use those in terms of being able to report out, but there would only be, I believe, one event associated with that one browser for a given period of time. So if that user decides to come back frequently, you're not going to see the number of hits to those events, nor will you have timestamps for that.
Yeah, good. Okay, we're going to go up a little bit, sort of out of the deep technique and more general implications. Can we expect measurement to go back to basics, stronger media mix models, panel measurement, channel specific measurement? And then this gets us into a topic we expected to have to talk about, of course, and that is MTA as we know it dead? And is there such a thing as market mix modeling 2.0? And if so, what does it look like and how does it differ from what we've always done?
Yeah, a lot of questions there, Paul. Yes, I think we can expect measurement to go back to the basics, but the marketing mix modeling your parents used has changed quite a bit. So if it's been a while since you've used it, there's some pretty modern, amazing things that are being done in the MMM space today. Panel measurement has a place. I think that A/B testing, if done based on geography, has a place. Lift testing, whether you're trying to validate some of the guidance you're getting out of your models. Some of the A/B testing is going to be more difficult if you can't control your test and control groups properly. That's really tough now with these proposed changes. And so if you can no longer identify a user on their device properly, and you don't have the ability to understand whether they're in your test or control group, your test falls apart. So I think we'll expect to see more geo-based testing as a result of this change, splitting up DMAs or markets to understand lift. We fundamentally believe that MMM has a firm place for many brands that, as I said, that maybe used it in the past. The capabilities have grown substantially over the last few years. And it can get to the level of detail down to campaigns and give a read within digital that you might expect from MTA previously, but of course it's a privacy safe approach because it doesn't use any PII.
Yeah, I think the biggest change to note is that, well, I'll talk about two specific things. One is the industry is going towards more aggregate data. So many of the small to medium sized companies, you're used to aggregate data, but large corporations, they're looking at raw event level, log files, time-stamped information, and looking at user path and all of that stuff. That's going to be a lot more challenging. What you're going to have to do is really rely less on deterministic data or consensus data, if you will, but deterministic data, and more on AI and machine learning for modeling. So companies are going to have to move towards an inferred model, doing overlays and trying to figure out cause and effect. And it will cause a lot more quote unquote guessing games within your data. So you're going to have to figure out yourself different correlations. It could be by state, it could be by creative, could be by publisher, but the idea of having deterministic data is going to be more challenging, especially if you're not working within walled gardens. If you're working with walled gardens, they have the ability to do a bit more of a closed loop reporting, especially using first party data on the back end to match with their own first party data. But if you're talking about the open web, that's where it's going to be a bit more challenging.
So we have more important questions coming from brands, but I sort of have a slightly contrarian view on AI. Two of the reasons why AI grew so fast over the last couple of years was one, open source, which doesn't change, but massive, massive, massive amounts of data. Aren't we really talking about eliminating? Are we going to have enough data for AI to actually work?
Yeah, AI is a tool. It's a tool in the toolbox, and it can be used in MMM quite effectively without the need to get to individual level data. We use it. Yep. So it has a place. The key though is to not rely on AI so much that you get led down to paths or decisions that aren't rooted in good fundamental business or in better evidence in the data. So, a blind application of AI can lead to bad decisions. So it's important to have context, to have business guidance, to have experience alongside of the AI to make sure that you don't drive off of a cliff.
And is that where panel data comes in again?
It can.
The validation source.
Or survey data.
Survey data.
Yeah, exactly. All right, here we have a question from a brand. I think it's a great question because it piques an interest that I have. This may be a stupid question. No, it's not. If my brand has first-party data and the publisher has first-party data, can we match those data to target my ads across the publisher's audience, i.e. user-level targeting based on the intersection of our respective first-party data sets? And then my postscript to that question is, how does first-party data work with or not work with topics and sandboxes together?
Yeah, so yes, you can, so long as the privacy regulations don't prohibit us from doing so. However, as I kind of mentioned in my report, in the state of data report, that only 45% of publishers feel that they have enough data to support first party activation. We anticipate, well, we don't have a concrete number nor can prove it, but the general consensus is that publishers can only monetize 20% of their inventory towards first party data. So it doesn't, it might not effectively provide you with enough reach. So you can continue to do so through identity solutions. But from a measurement standpoint, again, that's still where the challenge is in terms of third-party cookies. How are you going to connect it? So unless you use a data clean room and possibly an identity solution to match your first-party data to their first-party data and align those conversions, it's going to be a little more difficult. And then I see the next question, and just for clarification, between Neustar Fabric ID and the Trade Desk ID. Trade Desk ID provides an interoperable way for multiple identity solutions to match their data for publishers and advertisers. So it's an interoperable standard versus Fabric ID, which is founded on a specific identity solution stack.
Good answer.
Angelina, I'm sorry, Paul. We hear from industry participants for brands that are moving from MTA solutions. It's an almost identical percentage. As you've got great identity match rates at the top level, but then as you get to individual publishers, your match rate starts to drop off substantially. And I would expect that we'll see that drop off even more with Google's change. So if it's a problem now, it's going to be an even bigger issue moving forward.
Well, the other thing is around opt-in rates, right? So we are moving towards, I think, as an industry where user consent is going to be crucial. But if Apple's iOS is any indication, right, where opt-in rates are about 18% for ATT prompts, if we move towards towards privacy sandbox from a browser standpoint, and only 18 to 20% of the market allows for consent of sharing of data, that's going to be even lower. I don't know, I'm not quite sure a lot of publishers would be able to, they might even just throw their hands up in the air and say, you know what, it's not even worth the effort. Unless they charge like 10 times more CPM rates.
So Jim's question is actually related to the issue about long tail and who really gets disfavored in this whole process. But Jim Meyer's question is, with the implementation of topics across Google's ad network, will Google be able to use its first-party data to gain a targeting advantage over publishers in the network itself?
Well, I think if you ask Google, they'll say, we've got some restrictions, but if you ask the rest of the market, they'll be like, yeah, they're going to. Are you kidding me?
Well, they already have a huge advantage.
I mean, so what does that mean for the long tail? How are they going to shake out in all of this?
So I think, so for clarification, Google is not supporting any identity resolution outside of their O&O. So if you want to target first-party data, you can do it with Google within their own properties, but the long tail sites are not going to be able to through the Google Ads platform. So I think if the long tail wants to support wants to use their first party data, they're probably going to need to work with a bunch of programmatic companies in order to match their first party data directly in order to gain scale. Now, the question is, what does programmatic look like in a world without third party cookies? I think it's going to be, for me, I think it's predominantly going to be private marketplace deals or automated guarantees, and clients are going to move away from open RTB like buys, which might be more challenging.
It's a very simple question. Does a list of topics exist anywhere that somebody can look up and see what they'll be working with?
I think they proposed about 200 or 300. Angelina, have you actually seen a published list?
Yeah, there's 350 right now, right? And it's very top level. However, there are discussions around expanding that, but for testing purposes, they have about a list of 350. If you go to privacysandbox.com, you should be able to drill into all the links to talk about topics, as well as there's a bunch of YouTube videos that if you search Privacy Sandbox, there's some great tutorials or demos of how some of the components of proposals work. But yeah, there's about 350 right now.
Thank you. So we've been talking about privacy according to the regulatory environment as it exists today. We haven't gotten any questions to the floor, but we thought it was important to talk about what is privacy going to look like in the future. So as we know, a number of the big tech companies have gotten together and tried to organize something that would press for federal standards, and we're not dealing with 50 individual states. To my knowledge, you can correct me, or the audience can correct me, I don't think there's any state program that requires opt-in right now, although New York had a proposal which was not accepted requiring opt-in last year. In your view, or in your company's view, what do you expect we'll see with respect to privacy regulation? And will we always be programming to the lowest common denominator? For example, if one state does have opt-in, does that mean we've got a program for opt-in for the entire country?
Well, there's about 15 states right now with active privacy regulations in their pipelines. Some or many are fashioned off of CCPA, CPRA. For us, one of the big questions, and this will vary, I think, state by state based on which party controls the legislature, is about private right of action. Can you take class action or not? Some states have allowed this, and other states haven't. And so you'll see these differences as these other states kind of fill in the void, the vacuum left at the federal level. We're just starting to see federal level movement and proposals. I think it's very early days, and states are filling that void on their own, and it creates a patchwork quilt of compliance for brands. Paul, as you mentioned, the question is, should I just take the most onerous collection of requirements and adhere to that across everything? That is a strategy. Angelina, you may have more to comment here as well.
Yeah, so I don't know the full details, but people that I know that are in this really deep are saying that there is no common denominator, right? Or it will be hard to find a common denominator. So if you do try and do that, there's just nuances from state to state. I think what we're currently seeing is also clarification on some of what the regulation means. So with CCPA, they just, I think it was CCPA, they just made a clarification that even inferred data, so if you're a brand and you're applying your own taxonomy or categorization to within the database about your users, you're likely going to have to disclose that information to Californians, right? So the rules are kind of constantly changing, and I think it's going to be a mess for at least the next couple of years. I don't think we'll have any federal regulation within at least by the end of this year. maybe perhaps even start the conversation starting next year. But it'll be interesting to see how that pans out with Privacy Sandbox too at the same time.
I just thought of a question. In this world, do device graphs go away?
Well,
Good portion of it, right?
yeah, there wouldn't be much left.
Oh, gee.
I mean, I could see a panel-based graph where you might have a sample, but
in fact, we have a study out there, Dash, right now, which is exactly how a number of the companies that have purchased this study are using it to validate their device graph. But it'll require a pretty big panel to actually get a reasonable one.
I mean, even with the changes to IPv4 to IPv6, which is around IP addresses and identification, like that, we're hearing a lot of disruption right now in terms of being able to identify geolocation and all that stuff, since many platforms are upgrading to IPv6. Now, if you ask me what those two mean, I have no idea other than it has something to do with IP address and location.
Super. We have time for one last question from the floor, and it's a big one. It's from Samantha. Third-party targeting wasn't all that accurate to begin with, contrarian view, and we've read that. Do we think that the conversion will shift towards more excitement for the future once solutions such as first-party DMPs, matching first-party publisher data and contextual and behavioral, have enough partnership data, have accuracy rates almost gone twice as much as from third-party data? It's a complicated question, but first-party DMPs, will they, this kind of goes to how do you mix first-party data with sandboxes and everything else. I mean, will we see companies that provide these kinds of targeting services simultaneously be using first-party data, sandboxes, and other methods?
Yeah, so I think from a targeting standpoint, we'll have several different creative solutions, right? So when we talk about first-party DMPs, and that's using the publisher's data, that's what we're calling seller-defined audiences at the Tech Lab, right? So creating audience segments and leveraging content taxonomies to come up with ad services that allow publishers to leverage their own data, be it unknown and known audiences for targeting. However, the issue is around measurement, right? So there might be ways to actually target, even with topics and Fledge, you'll be able to target individuals that might help to minimize some of the waste. I just don't know if we can scale it, but I think from a measurement standpoint, that it doesn't solve for measurement.
Very good.
We would agree. You know, when you try to mix the targeting and personalization with measurement, they're different use cases altogether. And things are going to be very difficult from a measurement perspective that's relying on identity. But you may get creative around targeting, but that will not solve the measurement side of the picture.
Very good. And that is the last word on the subject. So with that, I would like to thank Angelina and Matt today. I'd like to thank Matt and OptiMine for sponsoring. I'd like to thank all of our attendees today. There'll be a quick 2-question pop-up question when you log off. We'd appreciate you filling it out so we can improve these insight sessions. And I just hope everybody else stays well and enjoys the rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.